What would he do with these books? He would imitate the scholars that he'd see, the Azhari scholars. So there were like 2 books on magic, and he knew that people were very interested in this subject. And what he would do, he would begin to read these books, and would begin to give lectures to the rest of the village. And because a lot of the women and the children, they didn't have opportunity to go to the masjid, they would call Sayyid Qutb after he finished school to come to their houses and give lectures about these books that he was reading. And he would sit and he would give lectures. But many of the occasions he would be shy and he would refuse to go to the houses of the women while he was a young lad. In 1919, his house, and this is when he was now 13 years old, was a secret meeting point for the revolution, and the revolution in Egypt. And Sayyid Qutb would often listen listen to secret meetings, and then later he would go and deliver sermons in the middle of the village about what's happening in the revolution. Sayyid Qutb later moved to Cairo. Now why is it that he moved to Cairo? He was in this village called Musha, and now he moved to this large town called Cairo. His mother was very upset at an incident that his father, because he was very generous on his children, and their inheritance was continuously decreasing. And his father basically spent so much on his children that he had no land left, and even his own house he was forced to sell. He was forced to sell the house and rent property. And his mother was very broken-hearted about this, and she said that she wants Sayyid Qutb to go out and work, and then give the money, earn the money, and then buy back the land. So she sent him to Cairo to work and train to become a teacher. To train to become a teacher, she sent him to Cairo. And so therefore Sayyid Qutb, he went to Cairo, and in 1924 he graduated with a diploma for teaching. But he wasn't happy with this, and he wanted to go into a university called Darul Ulum. Okay, it was one of the most famous universities in Cairo, the Darul Ulum. And before you can go to Darul Ulum, you needed to do a 4-year preparatory course. So Sayyid Qutb, he enrolled in this 4-year preparatory course, and then he succeeded in this, and he graduated in 1929, and then he went to Darul Ulum, which he graduated from in 1933. With a first class, okay, what you could call a degree in Arabic language and literature. And while he was studying Arabic language and literature, these are the following units that he studied. Okay, Sharia, Arabic and comparative language, logic, philosophy, history and political economics, as well as other units. So those people that say that Sayyid Qutb, he didn't study Sharia and he didn't have a knowledge of the Sharia, okay, this is a false accusation. And Darul Ulum was a place where if you went there to study Sharia, okay, they would teach you Sharia properly, and was a very respected place. In 1933, after he graduated, he was employed by the Education Ministry. And then in 1940, he was editor and translator for the ministry. 4 years later, however, 1944, he was transferred to the job by the ministry to the role of school inspector, as they were unhappy with his political views. They didn't like his articles that he was writing and the things that he was translating, so therefore they transferred his job to become a school inspector. In 1948, it should be there to 1950, not 1952. From 1948 to 1950, he was sent to America to study the methodology of education and teaching. And then as soon as he came back from America in 1950, he resigned from the ministry. Okay, he resigned from the ministry after serving all those years. He resigned from the ministry because he differed with them in their political activities. Sayyid Qutb, however, after having such a Islamic upbringing, there was a time of Jahiliyyah that he lived, his own Jahiliyyah. Okay, he lived his own Jahiliyyah. And there was a time, and this period lasted 15 years, from 1925 to 1940. And basically it was a period when he went to Cairo. When he went to Cairo and was studying in the universities, and went to Cairo and was studying in these higher education faculties, this is where he began to read about Western civilization and Western culture, and about the principles of materialism. And these concepts, they raised severe doubts in his mind about the religion. And that goes to show, if someone like, some brothers, you sometimes see them, they go, to study in these Islamic or these so-called universities where they have like Islamic studies master's course, Islamic studies 3 years course and PhD, and they become very confused afterwards. They think they're very solid on the religion, but because of the kind of ideas that are being, implanted in them, they become very confused. And if someone like Sayyid Qutb, having such an Islamic upbringing, could become confused by these ideas, it shows that we also should be very careful when tackling these ideas. Sayyid Qutb, he lived in doubt, worry, fear, pain, rebelliousness, and he wanted to know always one thing. He wanted to know what was the secret of life. He wanted to know what was the secret of life. He became so confused he didn't know. And he said about himself that he would often cry and scream and wish death would take him away from the pain and contradiction that he was living. He lost all sense of tranquility and inner peace and did not know the pure purpose of creation or the wisdom behind the creation of man. And he even recorded all of this period in a selection of poems which he called The Unknown Coast, Ash-Shati al-Majhul. And he's described himself as, for example, he is standing on a coast and he's looking at the sea and he doesn't know what the sea is, how big it is, what the name of it is, and that sea represented his life because he didn't know what life was about at that time. How did Sayyid Qutb then begin to become an Islamist? And how did Islam then permeate his life once again? You see, when Sayyid Qutb, he discovered the deen, a complete change overcame him, and he moved to the world, away from the world of ignorance and confusion, and in darkness to the world of Iman, Islam, work, da'wah and jihad. And he became as if he was a complete new man. And he said, this is as if I have been born again. Sayyid Qutb was looking for the secret of life, and he found it. How did his journey begin? His journey started and began when he started to study the Quran in a literal way. He looked at the Quran. His background was always in Arabic literature and language, and he began to study the Quran, in a literal way. And he slowly began to understand the principles underlying this religion. And then something happened to him. Two incidents happened when he went to America. He left Egypt and he went to America. And two incidents happened to him. They were, number one, he says that while he was going to America, he was on the boat, on the ferry to America, and he saw the huge waves and the way the boat was rocking, and at that point he realized the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he said Iman entered into his heart. Iman entered, he felt Iman actually seeping into his heart. That was the first incident in America. The second incident, he said he was in San Francisco and he climbed a large mountain and he could see the whole of creation in front of him. And he realized the wonder and the beauty of the creation, and he realized the harmony that existed in the creation of Allah and in the universe. And Iman, he said, it hit him. The sweetness of Iman at that point, it hit him. And that they were two incidences in his life that really caused an upheaval in himself. And we can, and after this, he took the Quran as a guide to his life. He used the Quran to help him understand life and the harmony between man and the universe. So he involved himself deeply into the Quran. If we were to look and chart his program as how he became a Muslim and how he became so involved in the deen, there are 3 steps that we can, look into his life. 3 steps towards his Islamization. First step we've already mentioned, it was the literal study of the Quran, and he himself formed a project called the New Quran Library Project, in which he would undergo the study of the Quran, the literal study of the Quran. And Sheikh Ali Tantawi at that time, he said about Sayyid Qutb, and the brilliance that he had in understanding the Quran. He said Allah gave him a key by which he opened the treasures of the beauty of the expression in the Quran. This key was not given to any person before him. This key was not given to any person before him. Sayyid Qutb himself talks about how the Quran affected him. And he says, الحياة في ظلال القرآن نعمة نعمة لا يعرفها إلا من ذاقها نعمة ترفع العمر وتباركه وتزكيه والحمد لله لقد من الله علي بالحياة في ظلال القرآن فترة من الزمن ذقت فيها من نعمته ما لم أذق قط في حياتي ذقت فيها هذه النعمة التي ترفع العمر وتباركه وتزكيه. He said that life in the shade of the Quran is a ni'mah, is a wonderful blessing. A blessing that nobody knows except the person who has tasted it. It increases the life of a person, and it gives them blessing in their life, and it purifies their life. And praise be to Allah, Allah has gifted me with life under the shade of the Quran. A small part of the time, I have tasted in it a blessing which I've never ever tasted the like of before. He talks about his experience with the Quran. And then he not only studied the Quran in a literal sense of way, but that Quran began to impact his ideology and his thinking, and then he began to use what he knew from the Quran in refuting communism and capitalism, ideas that were permeating the Egyptian society at that time. And he wrote many books. A very famous book that he wrote at that time was Al-Adala al-Ijtima'i fi Islam. The justice system in Islam. Alright, he wrote, for example, the battle between Islam and capitalism. And thirdly, the third transition in his life was his complete and comprehensive understanding of the religion as a movement towards all aspects of life. And he realized his duty to Allah, his duty to be a witness unto mankind, okay, to spread the religion. He realized this from his works in the Quran, and he realized that what he has to do for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the life that he has to lead.